Hello and welcome to another episode of Your Goddess Awakened. I have with me one of my dearest friends, the amazing Elizabeth Purvis. Elizabeth and I met a number of years ago because we were in a coaching program together.
Learn the ways of the goddess and accomplish much more with so much less effort. Welcome to Your Goddess Awakened with Halle, Eavelyn, a show dedicated to helping you embrace your divine feminine and nurture your inner goddess for a radiant life. We invite you to join us every week to receive goddess wisdom that will help you through your current obstacles and lifelong traumas. Awaken the goddess within you and transform your business and your life, only here on Your Goddess Awakened.
She was one of the very first people that I thought of for this podcast because we talk about the masculine and the feminine and what it means to be a woman in a man's world and all those things pretty much all the time in everything that we discuss. So I thought I'd bring her on here. We talked today about all of that. So hi.
Hey, woo, here we are, made it. So great
Finally.
to be here and share space with you. And yes, you are definitely one of my dearest friends. I just, all the things.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I couldn't be happier to have you here. So thank you again. So when it comes to the sacred divine masculine and feminine, I have learned a lot from you about it because I've learned new words. I used to get really scared about the word feminine, and you've been using that word for a decade. So tell me about that.
Long time. Yeah, years ago. So for those who don't know me, my name's Elizabeth Purvis. I have been in this online coaching space for a long time. I'm a business coach, but I also am a metaphysical teacher. And I initially sort of got into this from the place and the perspective of wanting to teach magic. And for me, business is the avenue through which I do that. And I mentioned that because years ago, when so I often say in our company, 7-figure goddess. So I claim the goddess title when not that it's a title, but you know what I'm saying. I claim that in our name, and I've used words like feminine and goddess for all these years. When I really leaned into that a number of years ago, and received the download that my mission in the world is to bring magic to the mainstream. I also had years and years ago drop in this idea of a feminine magician. And it's a term that has always come back to me. I mean, I really remember it was like in 2009 when I still lived in Brooklyn, when the term came to me for the first time. And so I've always been interested in, so we have, the trademark feminine magic, and we use that name in certain things. And it, to me, and many times, I mean, I'll be really transparent. Like I've asked myself, because in a way there is no such thing as a feminine magician. And I'm like, well, maybe I should drop it, whatever. But I think one of the reasons why I hold on to that word, especially in that context, is because of, I'm very, very interested in bringing them in the feminine and masculine polarity and how those two energies play out together. It's like we can talk about the feminine, but we kind of can't talk about the feminine without the masculine there too. So that's always appealed to me. And when I use terms like feminine, they're often in a context that has a lot of masculine energy. And it's almost, I'm if you can't tell, I'm like working this out as I'm talking. Like,
yes, this is awesome.
That like part of my use of that term in these kind of more masculine sort of energies is to bring those two energies together. So while at the same time really loving and embracing the feminine, like I love being a woman. I love feminine energy. Like most women, or I think like many women, it's been a journey for me to fully embrace the feminine. And I remember feeling sort of the two masculine conflict when I was very young, and yet at the same time feeling a tremendous amount of feminine energy in me. And it's just like a fun polarity to play with. And it's also wonderful to lean into feminine energy in a big way. So I don't know if that answered your question, but those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's all that stuff is super helpful. Yeah, so I ran my first business when I was in my early 20s. I was in the software business, and because that's what you do. You go from being an actress to running an interactive film company, and I always say I was one of 5 female executives in the entire industry, and I remember thinking, and this has come up so much since I've started this podcast and since I've started being on podcasts, because I talk about this all the time. I got to this place where it was like, oh, I'm one of the boys. Like, I can do anything they can do. And there was never a moment where I went, and I don't have to, I can do this my way. It was always like, either how can you manipulate the men to like make them think this thing is their idea when it isn't? How can you manipulate the men to make them think that you're going along with them? Or how can you come up with an idea of your own that won't make men think badly of you or less of you, or that will shine your light too bright and make them uncomfortable? So none of those things feel like they're particularly healthy ways to get and execute, or get inspiration, and which is the feminine, and then execute it, which is the masculine. Yeah. So did you have, you came from a completely different background than I did. Did you have that kind of issue for you?
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about your background too for people.
So I definitely, like many, I think, very creative, generative women, I think for a lot of us because, you and I are entrepreneurs, we are creators. The whole energy of creation has a masculine, feminine side, but I think it leans a little more toward the masculine side and the execution part of it, obviously. How when we think of like creating and manifesting, there's a lot of masculine there, right? And yet we also have kind of masculine ways of doing things versus feminine, also what I've played with for a long time. My background is actually in computer science, and I was an engineer for many years. So I know all about the whole like inner conflict of I don't like women, or I don't, I'm not comfortable around women, and I want to be in this men's environment. And I was in a man's environment for many, many years. And for me, it was like I was more comfortable there for a long time, because there's a part of me that was really sort of comfortable in the reason and the logic and all of that. And yet I think one of the reasons why I ultimately left it is because I didn't want to stay in that anymore, if that makes sense. And when I did, leave it and go out on my own, I remember thinking to myself, like, I really feel grateful that I have that energy, and I was able to kind of work with the guys and to have the kind of immersion into very masculine spaces. And I wasn't leaving in that like, wow, I've had XYZ happen to me and it's been terrible, which I know a lot of women struggle in real corporate, masculine corporate environments, for lack of a better word, or corporate environments with lots of men is what I mean. I didn't have that experience so much, but it was like I was looking for more, being in that very masculine energy environment, not just the people that were around me, but the actual work itself, both helped me develop that energy in myself, but also like inspired me to a certain point, take it and bring it into another context and bring the feminine aspect of myself back, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answers your question too.
Yeah, I feel like, as you're talking, I'm reminded of something that happened to me when I was running Hyperbole Studios, which was our software business. We had a deadline that was completely, as happens certainly so often in those days, I don't know about now, but in those days, they would be like, okay, we need to have this out for Christmas, which means it needs to be out by October, which means, sorry that it's March, but you have to cram 2 years worth of work into the next 8 months or whatever. Yeah. And and they, so we had this like really ridiculous deadline, and it was obvious that we were going to miss it. And we told them we were going to miss it. And that we were working with a company where the guy, the owner of the company was, his name was Paul Jan, and he was an Indian man, and he was a son of a, and I don't like to curse, but no question, he like made everybody around him miserable. And we got on a plane, we'd flown into San Jose, and we were, meeting with him. And he was so nice, charming, and, complimented my dress or whatever. And then he turned around and started screaming at me, not at my partner, who was my, my beloved as well. Like, we ran our businesses together for so long, but he started screaming at me. And I knew in that moment, all he wanted was to make me cry in front of a room full of people, that there was a power thing going on for him. Yeah. And I was like, of course, I wanted to crawl under the table, burst into tears, curl up into a fetal position, and come out at 10 o'clock at night when everyone had gone home. Right. And instead, I remember saying, like, I will not cry. He will not break me in front of all these people. Yeah. And I mean, that is so toxic, right? And it was very different from the environment. We were up in Seattle, being all granola-y with grunge movement happening, and just like really in a very creative environment. And that kind of toxic energy didn't really exist because we were the ones running the business. It existed in a different way. We had terrible time management capabilities. It took me years to self-recovery there. But that kind of like power play was pretty unknown. And yet now looking back on it, I mean, eventually he was taken down by a reporter from the San Jose Chronicle or something, who got so mad at the way he was treated that he went and found out that the guy was had cooking the books and paying for his mistress on business, on company business. And I mean, he went down, the company went down, everything. So it was really you got to see karma just showing up. But it was really interesting because that kind of thing it can ruin the next 20 years of your life or whatever. And yet there's different ways of approaching everything so that everything can be kind of, reframed or more positive. And you and I play in that world all the time. Has anything like that ever happened to you? Or?
It's really interesting. You'd think that in my engineering background, I would have had possibly a lot of that. But I think, and this was also everyone kind of in the late 90s, early aughts. So I got my master's in 1998. And I started working in engineering in 1995, and then, ended up leaving at the beginning of 2007. And I was really fortunate, and it was in New York, in Digital Alley, in the nascency of the .com, whatever, lived through the crash, all that kind of stuff. I was really the men I was around, they weren't super toxic at all. They were actually, the thing that was actually toxic to me, especially as a squishy empath, was just all the energy they were running. Like, there was one guy in particular I remember, and I had a bit of a crush on him because he was super cute, but he was also neurotic, and he was the CTO of one of the companies I worked for, and he was always running around. And I remember him running into a meeting with us one time, and saying to us, "The internet is down," as in the actual internet, the entire internet is down, which of course, it's the internet is actually designed to not go down. That was much more toxic, so to speak, just the constant barrage of energy and the constant intensity of it. And then the other thing that was really difficult is that, and this is, I think, something a lot of women, I'm pretty freaking smart. Right. And yet it was very challenging.
I agree.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's so dumb. It just feels weird to say that. There's no whatever. It feels weird to say that. But that one of the reasons why I left that job is because I literally felt stupid all the time. And I knew that it was an illusion, right? Because I couldn't I have a real, and everyone here in the coaching industry knows I have a real systematic and kind of linear approach and stuff. But I wasn't great at troubleshooting and applying that in the computer science context. And I would really struggle to figure things out. And all the guys seemed, how I was interpreting it was like smarter than me. And no one would ever rub it in my face. Like all the guys that I worked with back at that time, because we were all a bunch of nerds too, we had like nerd rapport. So there was I didn't have like a ton of like toxic, that kind of energy, but I couldn't hold my own in it, if that makes sense.
And I think that happens to women.
I can't deal with this. Like, I'm out, like, this is too much,
I think that happens to women a lot because there isn't usually the kind of environment where there's somebody there saying, hey, kid, you're doing good. Or, hey, here's a new way of learning this, or here's a new approach that you might, resonate with better. And I work from home. You have got your in is all completely remote. So other than my house manager and my, my housekeeper who comes in once a week, I'm not interacting with my team physically. But that also can be very isolating for people because you don't have somebody saying, hey, kid, you did a great job in the meeting today, because you got done with the Zoom phone call, you hung up and you went on to the next thing, right? Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about what women can do to give themselves that grace themselves, because they ain't getting it from anybody else.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I haven't thought about any of this in a while, like those days, and I mean, I really acknowledge like how I got, like, I knew I wasn't stupid. Do you know what I mean? Like, I knew I wasn't at all. And, like the evidence, even if I felt that way, like the evidence was to the contrary, but I'm like, I can't handle feeling like this, like this is not good for me. And I think, one of the things I did was really, I was looking out for myself. I was my own advocate in there, if that makes sense. It's like, I was really in tune. And this, I think, is something we all can do and we can choose to do, is be really in reality about what is working and what isn't working, and be clear about what we want, and then say yes or no based on what it is that we want and what it is that we're choosing. I was like, I'm not available to feel stupid anymore. I'm not available to feel like I'm not doing a good job, And so I knew that engineering wasn't my forever calling. So it was very easy for me to be like, okay, now I'm going to go do the real thing, kind of a thing. But if it had been my real calling, I think I still would have said to myself, I'm not available for this anymore. And how as a woman, can I make the choice that I'm going to make and have it be so, insist that it be so, And I think that that's something that, we all, throughout all ages and stages, and no matter where we are, get to do. And especially women, because we, there's all sorts of opportunities. I mean, this is true for men too, but there's all sorts of opportunities for us to buy into the various illusions. I could have bought into all kinds of illusions there that came out of this feeling stupid. And I didn't. I was like, no, you know what? The reality is XYZ. And here's how I'm choosing to move forward and be proud of who I am, and take my, in this case, it was like, take my skills and talents and apply them in a different way.
It's funny because that's when you talk about like the feminine magician, right? I'm thinking about the feminine magician as the woman who says, okay, I'm done. I'm not available anymore for this thing to be this way. Now I'm going to claim this new path for myself. And that may not feel like magic to a lot of women. That may not feel like, that energetic shift may not feel like enough. One of my lessons, but it is enough. And that's my point, is like what you're talking about is literally creating magic, but you're doing it subtly. And one of the things that I'm learning is that spirit is inviting us, and spirits, for those of you that don't know, spirit's my favorite word for God or goddess.
Yeah.
And please feel free to substitute your own. But spirit is subtle, and much more subtle than I've ever given it credit for. Like, I'm learning now how subtle the nudges are of magic creation, how subtle the invitation is to just like go move 1 degree to the left or 1 degree to the right. And then that's where the magic is happening. And I feel like when you talk about the idea of feminine magic, you're talking about that space where you realize it isn't all like abracadabra and smoke and mirrors. To create an illusion, which is what magicians supposedly do, it's about legit magic, right? Because abracadabra actually means, from the Aramaic, I create as I speak.
My
So
favorite. I love abracadabra.
I love it too. Yes. And I think it sounds a little bit more like it sounds in Harry Potter, like, Avada Kedavra, but not in a bad way. I mean, J.K. Rowling like appropriated it as the death curse, the killing curse, but I think it's really like a magnificent thing, because creating as you speak and the ability to create with your words, to create with your intentions. I mean, the creative force is the feminine. It belongs to the feminine to create. And so I feel like that's just it belongs to the realm of the feminine. So I feel like that's just another magical thing that we get to have.
Yeah, it's another aspect of sure. And I mean, the thing I loved about, and I still do, about the term feminine magic and feminine magician is the tension there, and the idea of creating from a more feminine standpoint while still having these energies be in balance and in play. A big part of what we do in feminine magic is it's like I've sort of systematized the beingness in a way that calls things in really kind of predictably, and it's the bringing of these two pieces together, right? Because the male, what we call male energy, is a very driven, executing, outward, and feminine is very, very inward, right? And both of those things come together, but it's really the inwardness and the beingness that activates it all, and that's a big piece of it for me, a big part of creation in general, and feminine creation in particular.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I certainly am hearing this all the time from women now, is that desire to balance the masculine and feminine inside of themselves. And I was working with a channeled group the other day, and the message that came through was, it isn't a 50-50 thing of like 50% masculine and 50% feminine. It's 100, and showing up fully in both spaces at the same time. And oh my goodness, I love that so much.
Good. That's so true. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So if that's the case, if the objective is not to have a set of scales inside of me where I'm creating 50-50 and can I get them exactly balanced, and instead the intention is, can I get this marriage where it's fully 100% inside of me? What are some things that come to mind for you, if anything, for how women can help to create that?
Yeah, and this is sort of speaking from my experience. I know from my experience, I definitely struggled with the whole like too masculine, too feminine thing. And I think a lot of women do. I think a lot of women, I've noticed a lot of women just get like hyper, like, oh my gosh, I'm too masculine and there's a problem. This is something I've noticed, especially in the coaching industry, that kind of, I mean, is to me is a little bit of like a knock it off. You know what I mean? There's all this like, this whole like balancing feminine masculine polarities. And I got really, really hung up on that. I thought, well, I'm too this, I'm too that, I'm not enough this, I'm not enough that. is kind of where it all went for me as I was back in those days, as I was even approaching the question. And it was really only until recently, like I had a conversation with someone we both know, and I realized I was still getting caught up in this, like, well, I'm too masculine. And she was like, Elizabeth, I've been in your world. Like, I've been one of your clients for like years. You're one of the most balanced people I know, you know? And I was like, oh, you know? And so all this is to say, I noticed how attached I was. You're so good at spotting stories, right? You're so good in people, Halle, at spotting stories and then just getting them out, you know? Like I noticed how attached I was to this story of like, well, I'm to this and I'm to that. I'm imbalanced. This is why I love the 100, 100. And I have to bring the balance back somehow. It's more like, for me, it became about, no, I get to acknowledge what's already there. You know, I have a real, I've got a lot of quote unquote masculine qualities, right? When we talk about sort of masculine energy and systematizing and stuff, but I also have a tremendous amount of feminine qualities. And that's true of all of us. You know, I remember telling my husband, over the years, I've been like, I'm getting the new too masculine thing again. And he would just laugh. He laughs his head off. No, he's just like, you've got, and every once in a while I'll be like, well, I got so and so commented too masculine, whatever, and he'll look at me like, and then he'll just start laughing and he'll walk away. You know, all this is to say is that I think, you know, here's someone outside of me who's able to reflect that back. I think that if we really look at this whole thing objectively, the out of balance isn't as much as we think, right? And for myself, I was just totally discounting. It was more like I was discounting this thing that was already there. And one of the things we say in Feminine Magic all the time is like, it's so much easier to manifest from a place of having and not having. The cool part is you have like 100% of the time. Everyone who's like in the I'm to this or to that conversation, it's like part of what we're doing is we're just becoming blind to what's already there. In the same way you're like, well, it's not a balance, it's like 100% both, right? Instead we have to, instead of being like, well, I'm all the way over here on this side of the polarity, well, actually you have all this other, you know, you've got this opposite energy activated and running if you choose to notice it and see it. And that was a huge thing for me, you know, because I would just be sitting there going, I'm too masculine, like over had I not like brought that back, you know, and had I not really gotten in reality about it, you know? And I feel like this is a place, this whole masculine feminine conversation is a place, it can become one of those things that women use just to tear themselves down. You know, you're already not enough in the not enoughness. So let's add not feminine enough on top of it. It's like, come on.
Yeah. You know, back when my girlfriend and I first got together, I struggled for like a year with, am I now a lesbian? Because I've been with a guy for almost 25 years. And so am I a lesbian? Am I not a lesbian? Am I not a lesbian? And finally I went, I'm just a person. And the thing that's wrong is the label, right?
Yeah.
And that was a big aha for me. And you're right. I mean, it's funny because I want different words for masculine and feminine. I mean, the words that I say now that I think help women is to stop calling it that and stop labeling it because of the gender implication. And the gender or sexual, take your pick, but either implication of that this has to do with your body parts or your sex drive or your whatever is nothing to do with it. If we switch it over to the concept of creative, receiving, allowing energy versus doing and systematizing and functioning energy, and then you understand, well, you got to have both in order to do anything, right? It's like, oh, I want to meditate, but in the cave, and then the bag of money is going to fall on my head. No, you have to meditate, which is the inner knowing and receiving, and then you got to go out into the world and execute if you want the bag of money. Both pieces have to be present. So I feel like there's this kind of maybe, going back to what you said, it's like, it's the label that's the problem and not necessarily even the balancing. Like if we just walked through the world as we are, we would give ourselves permission to show up fully every day. I mean, I worked with a client earlier today and I said, if you could wave a magic wand and fix one thing, what would that be? And she was like, oh, I would be more authentically myself. And then in the story she was telling me, it was like her family wouldn't let her be. But I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean let you? Like, isn't it your choice still? And we do that to ourselves all the time. We're constantly saying, well, I can be this way, but only for this person, or I can be this way, but only in this context. And I can't just like show up as me, be me fully, and not worry about it all the time. And those masculine, feminine labels, same dealio. We're telling ourselves those stories about it has to be like this, or it has to be like this. And what if it weren't any of those things? What if you just like allowed yourself to enjoy your life more and weren't at that metacognition level where you're outside going, let me point out to you what you did wrong about this, or let me point out to you how you need to be more masculine or more feminine here. Anyway, I just, this is like really helping me too. So I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something I've thought about. I mean, or, it's part of the whole thing. I also want to acknowledge that, the whole masculine, feminine polarity balance, etc. And there's my daughter.
Hi, Bridget.
My daughter Bridget out there, is a big deal for a lot of women. And there's a lot of wounding and trauma and unpacking and all the things. And I don't want to discount or, diminish any of that or anyone's experience in any way. I would just really invite, and I know you don't either. I would just really invite, I find that the best way to integrate things and to call things into being is to notice and focus on what's already there, and we create based on our hi. Yeah, it's good to see you. I'll be out in a minute, okay? I know she's waiting for me to plant the corn outside.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that you have a garden and that you can plant corn and all those things. That's so awesome.
Really patient. It's been, there she is. Okay. All the things.
All the things.
Anyway, I hope it's actually kind of a good little segue here. One of my hopes and about this whole conversation is that we can raise women who can feel really comfortable with both energies, however they choose to express them. Like we didn't even talk about binary and non-binary and how, gender identity and all of that, which of course plays a huge role. And I feel so much of this is about becoming at peace and becoming at peace with whatever one is choosing and having access to both of those energies whenever we choose.
Yes.
And in feminine magic, that's a big piece of what kind of goes into it for me, because both energies are so powerful and so useful and are necessary for creation and all the things. And, part of being to me, one of the healthy way to use polarity is to be able to be with both and kind of be fluid with either one and with whatever you're choosing at the time, And that's kind of where I hope we can get and to be in a place with the whole feminine and masculine conversation in the women's empowerment community, especially.
Yeah. And it sounds like if we do what you just said, that there will be a natural progression toward non-binary as a human race, because we'll recognize that it's humans, not man, woman, just human. And that will allow us, if what you just said is the way we go, it would eliminate conversations about homosexuality or heterosexuality, transgender. We wouldn't need to talk about it. People would just be who they were as they chose to be. And if they felt like being something different that day, that year, that month, that lifetime, whatever, that would be okay too. And it would allow everyone a lot more freedom and a lot more choice to just be who they feel like being, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, because I don't mean when I say that, I don't mean to be like eliminate gender. You know what I mean? I think I identify as a woman. I love identifying as a woman. Like it's just, And yet I want for people to be able to lean into these energies and identify however they choose to, and be able to really tap into both. I think in terms of like energetic imprints, like uh, uh, in our work, a lot of it is like, well, this is the energy of this, and this is the energy of this, and masculine and feminine are both really powerful energies. And it's like, can we eliminate? Well, first, can we acknowledge that we each have both, and can we acknowledge that we are human and we have our power of choice as a human, and can we be comfortable with either one as we choose, acknowledge and see the differences in both, and also honor the differences in the choices of everybody else, be able to move about the cabin in that way. That's really accepting and nurturing and honoring. And I think in so doing will heal a lot of the bullshizzle of many years.
Many lifetimes. Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming here, being with me today, having this conversation with everyone, and for continuing to show up in the world the way that you do, and continuing to help feminine magic permeate throughout the universe. This is marvelous. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And this has been a fun. I haven't had this kind of conversation on a podcast in like a while. That's probably
Good. Well, we won't bore people then. All right, good.
Thank you, everyone, for who's been here listening to us. I know it's always an honor to receive time, energy, and attention from audiences like yours. So thank you, all of you who are listening, for sharing space with us as well.
And this has been another episode of Your Goddess Awakened. Tell your friends, tell the people that you know need to hear this, and enjoy. Till next time, blessings.
You have just listened to another enlightening and transforming episode of Your Goddess Awakened with Halle Eavelyn. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and join us again next time so you can continue your journey towards a full transformation. For additional resources and to learn more about working with Halle Eavelyn, visit halleeavelyn.com. Receive more, do less, and love your life. Only here on Your Goddess Awakened.